Hello everyone and welcome to our second video in our CSS training series. So my name is Daniel Shonuga. I'm a software developer and an instructor at Alibian Solutions, where we upskill people with tech skills such as web development, mobile development, digital marketing, email marketing, and social media marketing, and even graphic design as well. So today we are going to be moving on to the next session of our CSS training, and which is going to be the colors and the background. So in the last class we've seen a little bit about the colors and we've used it in some ways. So now let's understand how we can actually use these colors, right? So the color properties allows you to specify colors of text inside of elements. Right, that color is a property, and it can actually specify any color in CSS using one of these three keywords. You have the RGB, you have the color names, and we have the Xcode. So the color names, they are predefined colors that are recognized by the browser. So for example, we have dark cyan, we have red, we have white, we have blue. They are names in words, WHITE, they are names in words that are actually color as specified in this example. So you can have something like this. This color is a property, and then the value is the color names, which is what we're looking at. And then we have the Xcode, which is a 6-digit code that represents the amount of red, green, and blue in a color. So usually you might just need to go and study more about how Xcode color are being combined, or if you are more interested in Xcode colors, you can actually just take a book on design and actually get that. But basically, this is how Xcode colors looks like. It starts with an hash sign, and then it's the remaining codes are then a 6-digit code which is mixed with alphanumeric sort of, yeah. So and then we have the RGB values, and these express color in terms of how much red, green, and blue are used to make up a color. So for example, this RGB basically means red, green, and blue, right? That's just how it is. So the more blue you combine here, or the more red you combine here, and the more green you combine here, determines the color you eventually have as a color. So that is also a concept which you might just need to check out if you want to know more about it. But for now, for the basics, let's just move on with the flow, and then we get to understand more about using it later on. So let me just go ahead and whip on my VS and Visual Studio Code, and let's just practice that. So I'm going to be calling my H1 here. So I'm going to say, okay, let me just take this back. I'm just going to leave this as plain as possible. So I'm going to say hello and welcome to the second training, like this, right? So remember our class that we talked about last class. So I'm going to call the class once more. I'm going to be saying my H1 once again. So in this case, I'm going to be working with my H1. Remember that classes you use dots to precede them. So my H1, and then I'm going to be using the color property. Now let's try the first one, which is the color name. You can see, as you can see, that that's not giving you it. So if you are using a good text editor, it should actually give you it like this. You can see the azure, you can see aquamarine. These are actually colors. Blue violet is a mixture of two colors, and you can see the S codes by the sides. Well, let's just go with brown, and let me just go back to my browser and refresh that. So you can see it's hello, welcome to my second training. That is the color names that we use. So let's now move to using an Xcode. So I'm going to be whipping up an Xcode. I'm just going to say F2 1. So these colors are actually mixed in a way. That's a kind of a way you mix them. So this is the color we have using when we mix that particular color. Usually you actually need a sort of design experience to actually just understand why you're using these colors. But for now, like I said, the basics, just use it and then move on. Alright. So that's that for the colors. Let me just move back to my VS Code. Let me just move back to my VS Code. And then let's now try using the RGB values. So I'm going to be whipping up the RGB. So as you can see, that specifies the red color. So I'm going to be saying 189, 175, or 167. I'm going to say 67. Now let's see what color this gives us. You can see this is giving us a, how do I call this? Is it a yellow or a brown? So that's a mixture of, you have add a lot of red, then add green, a lot of green, and add less blue. So this is the color it will for me. Just like mixing colors when you're still in primary school, just that kind of sense. So that is how this RGB works. So that's it. That's the RGB. And then now let's move to the RGBA, which is the opacity. So let's say we have a color, let's say we have a background in general, and you want it to have a kind of transparency, right? So we use the RGBA instead of using the RGB. So the A stands for what do you call it? It stands for it basically works as the opacity value, and it's also called an alpha value as well. So when you're using a value, an opacity value of 0.5, it is actually 50% opacity. And when you're using a value 0.15, it is a 15% opacity. So let's just work with that and get better idea of it. So I was using RGB, let me just add A in front of it, and then I'm going to be having a fourth value, which is an opacity. So let's work with 50%, which is 0.5. So you can see the color of this has actually dimmed a little bit, right? So let's go back to my browser and see that this is actually working. So we did not check it when we did the RGB. So let me just go back to this place and remove this opacity and show you how different it is between when I put the opacity and when I did not put the opacity. Right, so you can see it is more brighter than it was when I added the opacity. So that is how it works. Alright, so now we're going to be looking at the backgrounds. CSS background properties are used to define background effects for elements. So we're just going to be looking at some properties of some background properties, just to have a quick idea of how it works. So we have the background color, we have the background image, we have the background repeat, we have the background attachments, and the background position. So there are still more background properties, but let's start with this and then we can see how far we can go with this. So we have the background color. This background color is basically what serves as a fill for your element, the color that serves as a fill for your element. So for example, let's say we're working with a div. Let's say we're working with a div now, right? I'm going to be working with a div. I'm going to do lorem ipsum. I'm sure we're familiar with lorem ipsum. So and if we're not familiar with it, we can just type the lorem like this. As you can see, it's already giving me an int. You should just press tab afterwards. It gives you that lorem ipsum generated words. Right. So I have this div of text which I'm going to refresh and see in my browser. So I have this. So now I want this to have a background of red or something. So I'm going to be working with the normal color. I'm going to be calling this. Let me call it an ID instead. Container like this. So in this place, I'm going to just clear this and I'm just going to do container. Remember, ID uses hash. So I'm going to do container like this, and I'm going to say background color, which is the first one we said. I'm going to just change it to brown, right? When we see this on our browser, you can see that the whole fill of where the text is occupying, it is brown. So that's what the background color is, right? So the next one we're going to be looking at is the background image. So let's say, for example, now you have maybe a container or a div, and you want that div to have a background image, to have an image embedded inside of it, right? So what you can do is use the background image property. So let me just go ahead and clear this since I don't need this for now. And I'm also going to do one more thing here, which is to add more text so that you can have a lot of words to play with. I'm going to do lorem as much as possible. Alright. So I'm going to clean this as a background image. So background image takes in a value which is URL. That is what you can use to specify the URL in CSS. So I'm going to be taking the value and I'm going to call in the path. So you can see my path already, which is what I have here. So you can create a folder and add images inside of it. So and then I have an image. I have 2 images inside of it. I'm going to just select the one below. Alright, so once I've selected it, let me go back to my browser and refresh it. So you can see this image inside of it, right? This is now my image inside of it. But note now there's an issue because I just have one image. What I just added is an image, but I'm seeing a repetition of several images, right? So this is what will lead us to our next property that we'll be talking about, which is the background repeat. So the background repeat, this is when images repeat over a particular image repeat over a set of times. And the reason why this image actually repeats is because probably the image is too small. So it's trying to like occupy the whole space of where the text or the block element occupies. So it's trying to occupy the whole space. So but if you don't want it to occupy the whole space, what you can just do is just set the background repeat. And now the background repeat has several values, but we're going to be playing with 3 values. So the first value we're going to be playing with, so I'm going to be typing background repeat. The first value we're playing with is repeat. So the first value we're going to be playing with is repeat. Which is the first value that we're having, and that is this. It's still the same thing, right? So we're going to be moving to repeat x. So repeat x basically means to repeat horizontally, and when we check it, it's still basically the same because this is occupying the whole space of the height, so you cannot see any difference for now. And then I'm going to do repeat y, right? And this is to occupy the whole space vertically, and like this you see only one, but it's not still one if you try to check properly. Or let me just increase the height of this thing. Let's want to increase the height and let's say 800 pixel. You see that this is actually occupying more space than usual, and I just need just one image of it. So what I can just do to actually just get my one image back, I also repeat no repeat like this, and then we have our particular image showing as once, right? So that is how the repeat works. And then let's now look at background attachments. So this background attachment just refers to how or where you place your image on. So all these properties are actually coming back to the image that we specified at first. So I'm going to be looking at background attachments, and I can just say okay. So the background attachment basically is where you want to place the element. So by default, the background attachment is actually scroll. And what I mean by that is this is the attachment. When I try to scroll on the screen, you can see that the image follows it up. So if I don't want that and I just want to make this image stay fixed on this position, what I can just do is just do fixed like this, and then once I scroll, you can see the image still stays on the same place. Nothing happens. Let me see. Yeah, so that was taking a quite a long time to know, but you can see the image still stays on the same position, right? That is what background attachment is. So now if I want to adjust the position of this image to come to the center around this place, what I can just do, as you must have guessed, is background position like this. I can just do a position like center top. So this just takes position, maybe top left, center right, bottom, all this kind of position. That's what this takes. So you can also add this, and then when I do like this, now you can see it has moved to this particular point. So that's how the background positioning work, and those are the background properties. So but one more property we're going to be looking at is the one that is actually very important, which is the background size. So this is how big or how wide the background image expands and covers, right? So now presently what we have is this image just occupying this particular area. What if I wanted to occupy this full column, right? So we can use the background size property. So then I'm going to be working with this. I'm going to say background size. I'm going to say you have 2 properties you can play with. You can play with contain and you can also play with cover. So if you play with contain, let's see what we have. You can see that it is just filling up the necessary space it can. It's not really filling everything. Since this image is a square image, it is filling as much space as a square image can fill. So now let's now see the other one and see what it gives us. I'm going to be using cover like this. And then let's refresh. Can you see? It's covering all the space possible that it can cover, and that's what the background size properties are. It covers all the necessary space it can cover, like all the space possible. It covers it as long as it is within that the container that it is meant to stay. So those are the background properties that we will look at, and then we're going to move on to the next thing, which is the web developer tools. And this is actually very important. As a developer or as a software developer, you need to know these tools, right? It makes your life easier when you're trying to test for some issues that you might be facing later on. So the first developer tools that you might need to know that's very important is the Chrome Inspect Elements, and this basically allows you to check, to edit, and also check the elements in your browser. So and the way we can do that is just like this. Now on this place I can just right click, mouse right click, and then click on Inspect. That's the last option you have at the bottom, and you can see details about this particular page here. You can see the body, the head, like the same thing I have in this place. All the codes I've written here, I can see it right inside of this place. Right, I can see my body, I can see my div that I just created, I can see the text here. So one interesting thing you can do is just come here and edit what you have inside of it. One interesting thing you can just come here, I can just say, okay, let me just right click and edit as HTML. I'm going to just come here, play a lot of things, and we'll now see how it reflects. So this is just a cheap trick you can just try out. You can see that everything now clears up. When I close this, I can see my text has reduced, but in my code here, it's still the same thing. Nothing has changed in my code. Everything still looks the same thing. So that's just a cheap trick you can just try, and it's actually fun. When I also started learning web development, so something fun that I had to try. And then we have the Firebug, and we have the Colorzilla, which is basically used to pick colors on your website. We'll learn more about that later on. And we have the Word Font, which is used to check fonts on websites. So more on fonts. So there are, and presently the font, the ways we can use font is calling the font family, right? And these fonts must be present on our system in order for us to use these fonts. But like I mentioned in the last class, there are ways in which you can actually call fonts which is not present on your system. And to fix this issue, there are typeface declared for font family in the CSS cannot be installed, and the Google font is used to link external typeface to the CSS fonts. Right? You can actually link a font from Google's font website and be using it on your website or on your HTML page, and it will work fine. So that's the way you can do that. Or you can also use our CSS3 fonts that CSS3 just brought, right? And we use the font face tag, and it is a rule, it is a CSS rule which allows you to show a font on your web page even if it is not installed on your system, and it allows you to specify a path that let's assume you probably downloaded the font on your system. You can use this font face to actually select a URL of where that font is and kind of use it on your system. So we've seen a lot about width and height in this CSS tutorial, where we talk about giving our elements width, giving our elements height. So that is just so the width and height property are used to set height and width of an element, and it can be auto, it can be max, there's as much values as possible that you can have for this particular property, which is width and height. So let's look at block level elements. A block level element always starts on a new line and takes up the full width. So that's what we call block level element. And an example of a block level element is the div. So as you notice, when we are working with our div, it covers the full width. That's a block level element. So those are block level elements that we can deal with, and then it stretches as far as much as possible in terms of width. So and then we have the inline elements. An inline element do not start on a new line. and it takes up only as much width as necessary. So it just takes up as much width as it can. It does not occupy the full screen like the block level elements. So we have display properties, and the display properties allows you to turn an inline element to a block level element, right? So elements that by default are not block level element, like the icon tag, the paragraph tag, and other tags like that are not block level elements. The display property can actually convert one from an inline element to a block level element, right? So, and these are the properties that we can play with in display properties. So we have the block, we have the inline, block, and then we have none. So in later classes, we'll see a lot more about how we can actually use this property, right? And how we can use it to make our CSS more interactive and beautiful. So, but in the meantime, I want you guys to go and practice what we just learned. I might leave a link to this particular document so you can just read through it once more and get an understanding about what I just mentioned. And also, I advise you to just go to w3schools.com, right? Just try to go to w3schools.com, and that place you can just have a little understanding about HTML, CSS. If you have knowledge about HTML, but about CSS, you can just learn a little about CSS so that you can actually follow this class properly and get and have a good understanding of what I'm trying to pass across. So, a good advice that I will just give to you before I round up this video is just try to practice as much as possible. Just put your best to practice as much as possible, and I'm definitely sure you can actually do something good with what you've learned. So, like I said, my name is Daniel Shonuga, and I'm going to be wrapping this video at this point, and I hope to see you again in the next video, which will be looking at the next steps, right? So thank you, and have a nice day.